Hello, everyone. We got a big news day. Really good to have you here. Big headlines we got to get through. Apparently, climate change is no longer the biggest priority at the UN summit. You see, President Biden and Emmanuel Macron out of France, they decided they wouldn't attend some of those meetings because it seems there's more pressing issues right now, like global stability, thanks to some allegations that Russia is making right now. It's funny how reality creeps in and messes with those good old climate change plans. Anyway, all of this happening, of course, as Vladimir Putin threatens aggression, like of the nuclear kind. So we'll get into that. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is out with its interest rate hike, just 75 basis points. And it's admitting that it has no idea whether or not it can actually prevent a recession from coming. Of course, a little news alert there, guys. We already have one, at least technically speaking, 2 quarters of negative GDP. One more thing we got to get to. Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, is back out. Old college shy here. She's coming out and announcing a lawsuit that she's filed against Donald Trump, former President Trump, and his children. It has certainly been her life's mission, political mission, to go after Donald Trump. It makes you wonder if she doesn't have a little appreciation, right, for the guy's existence, given that I guess she owes her entire political career to him. It's good to have you here. Welcome to the program, everyone. As I said, lots of news to get to today. I want to point out that portions of the program are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. There's never been a better time to invest in precious metals right now. Obviously, given this inflationary trajectory, the concerns, of course, about a recession, gold is one of those things that helps to even out some of the volatility in your portfolio. So you could get something like a gold-backed IRA to help preserve the value of your dollars in the future. And if you do, I'd like you to give my friends over at Legacy Precious Metals a ring. LegacyPMInvestments.com is their website. We'll talk a little bit more about it coming up. But first, to the news that's happening in New York. Reality really, it kind of stinks, right? When you can't, you plan a whole conference. Think about that. This whole conference was planned around the idea of climate change. And suddenly, there's been this shift. I mean, you can't get the president of the United States to attend the breakout sessions because, well, Vladimir Putin, that guy's in the way again. Of course, it didn't really change his speech. He has his priorities after all, right? Listen.
As I said last year, the United States is opening an era of relentless diplomacy to address the challenges that matter most to people's lives, all people's lives. Tackling climate crisis, as the previous speaker spoke to. Strengthening global health security, feeding the world.
And it gets a little tough when Russia decides to cut off that pipeline that supplies Europe with its natural gas. It gets a little tough when you lose the breadbasket there in Ukraine. That's the time when you probably ought to be saying to yourself, gee, maybe, just maybe, I'm going to go out on a limb here. We might want to think about investing in our own sources of energy and our own sources of food and anything that's vital to our existence as a country. Because we certainly don't want to be in a situation like Europe is right now. We don't want to ignore the reality of this moment. And the reality, as by the way, Jamie Dimon totally gets. Jamie Dimon speaking on Capitol Hill, telling Congress, we need fossil fuels in the here and now. You don't want to ignore that reality, because if you do, you could very well find yourself in a very vulnerable state, as we see, of course, with Germany. So this is kind of important stuff. I'm going to get to Jamie Dimon in a second because we got to explore that a little bit more. But before I do, given, as I said, the world that we are in right now, given growing inflation, I can tell you this. I don't think that the Federal Reserve 75 basis points will be enough, not at this point in time. And I think you have only to look at what we had to do in the early 80s to combat inflation with Paul Volcker raising rates. Imagine this, the benchmark rate to 20%. We're nowhere near that. And I don't think this Federal Reserve has the confidence, the political capital, if you would, to be able to really do that. I mean, heck, they won't even tell you you're in a recession. They're wondering if maybe we'll still get one. I mean, as I've always said, by the time these guys figure it out, hopefully, we'll be out of it. But this is one of the reasons why I think it's important to diversify your portfolio. And there's lots of ways to do that. One of my favorites, of course, is by investing in gold. You can also invest in silver. Go to Legacy PM Investments. Check them out, legacypminvestments.com. They get a free guide. You can sign up, get all the information there. I want to be protected. I imagine you do too. So legacypminvestments.com, 1-866-589-0560, 1-866-589-0560. But like I said, it really kind of stinks when you have to deal with the very real threat, right, of global stability, energy prices, things like this. It's why it was important for Jamie Dimon to say what he said. I mean, there's been such a kind of woke culture that's been enforced upon Wall Street, enforced upon corporations. And as such, the only game in town is ESG, environmental, social governance. You have to live by a certain number of rules if you want investors putting money in your company. So Jamie Dimon's saying, look, we need more clarity on this. And that matters because he runs one of the most respected investment banks in the world, JP Morgan. So for him to come out and say that to lawmakers, that was kind of a big deal because he is a very respected voice. He said that we're not getting it right. If you want to ensure that you are going to have a reduction in greenhouse emissions, then you need to be thoughtful about investing in the proper projects, which also includes still, if you want to have an economy, the traditional energy sources. So again, an important message because that somehow gets lost. Reality doesn't seem to matter anymore. And I think that it's not fair for the American people to wind up paying the price because there's a particular agenda. And let's be very clear, it is an agenda and there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of people that will become very rich as a result of all this ease. They already have been, by the way. I just worry about middle-class consumers that are facing these escalating energy costs and these escalating food costs that are going to continue growing worse as the conflict escalates overseas. So I'm glad that he did that. I want to get to one other story because I'll tell you, never a dull moment, if you would, in the Trumpville arena. Letitia James, who has made it basically her life's mission to take down Donald Trump and his family. She is out with a lawsuit against the former president and his children.
Violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company. The complaint demonstrates that Donald Trump falsely inflated his net worth by billions of dollars to unjustly enrich himself and to cheat the system.
And cheating those big banks, don't forget, because it was the big banks that did their own due diligence and decided that he was a worthy credit risk. So I guess we got to protect them, right? I mean, that's effectively what she's kind of saying. He cheated those banks. I don't know if that's really going to play in Peoria, as they say. She's going to keep trying, right? I mean, she's got to go for something. This is her entire political existence that's dependent on it. I think a lot of people would argue that she's crossed a line by personalizing it so much, by making it so political, because it detracts from any kind of case she might have. And again, I'd get back to she might have, because don't you need the banks to be kind of upset that they think that they were defrauded out of something? And what does that say about them? I mean, did they not do any due diligence to figure out what his real estate assets were worth? You got to think about all those things. Anyway, wonderful to have you here as always. Tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit more about investing in this environment. I've got Key City Capital's Charlie Domback joining the show, so make sure you tune in for that, and we'll chat then.